Welcome to the Master Reset Podcast, where we take you from where you are to where you want to be. Today I'll be speaking about overcoming unbelief. Now, the original Greek word that's translated into the English word unbelief is apatheo. Thayer's Greek lexicon defines apatheo in the following way: not to allow oneself to be persuaded. Apatheo is also the root word from which the English word apathy is derived. Apathy is a lack of feeling, emotion, interest, thought, and concern about something. It is a state of indifference. I believe that the opposite of love is not hate, but apathy. Love is by nature caring. Apathy, by its very nature, couldn't care less about a person or a matter. According to the Strauss Concordance, the original Greek word that's translated into the English word hate actually means to love less. Jesus used this word hate when he told his disciples, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be my disciple." And this is found in Luke chapter 14, verse 26. Does Jesus condone hatred of our parents, siblings, spouse, and children? Of course not. He expects us to love him more than all the important people in our lives. In other words, if we are to be his disciples, we need to love everyone else less than we love him. When you hate someone, the person whom you hate is actually on your mind. When you are apathetic about someone, on the other hand, that person is not even on your mind. Whether that person lives or dies doesn't make a difference to an apathetic person. This is due to the fact that they live as if the other person doesn't exist. Having unbelief in one's heart towards God is living as if God doesn't exist. According to Jesus, whoever has unbelief in their heart towards God is already condemned. And this is found in John chapter 3, verse 18. At God's command, Moses sent 12 men, one from each tribe of Israel, to explore and spy out the promised land. 40 days later, when they returned from exploring the land, 10 of the 12 spies gave a bad report to the Israelites. They said, "We can't attack those people. They are stronger than we are." And they spread among the Israelites a bad report about the land they had explored. They said, "The land we explored devours those living in it. All the people we saw are of great size. We saw the Nephilim there. We seem like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them." Numbers chapter 13 from verse 31 to 33. The Israelites responded to this bad report by weeping loudly and grumbling against Moses and Aaron. They said, "Why is the Lord bringing us to this land only to let us fall by the sword? Our wives and children will be taken as plunder. Wouldn't it be better for us to go back to Egypt?" And they said to each other, "We should choose a leader and go back to Egypt." Yes, you heard correctly. The Israelites wanted to choose a leader to lead them back to slavery in Egypt. They would rather go back to slavery than trust God to empower them with his grace to defeat their enemies and possess the land that God has promised them. Caleb and Joshua, on the other hand, gave a good report to the Israelites, even though they were exposed to exactly the same set of circumstances as the other 10 spies. Joshua son of Nun and Caleb son of Jephunneh, who were amongst those who had explored the land, tore their clothes and said to the entire Israelite assembly, "The land we passed through and explored is exceedingly good. If the Lord is pleased with us, he will lead us into that land, a land flowing with milk and honey, and will give it to us. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not be afraid of the people of the land, because we will devour them. Their protection is gone, but the Lord is with us. Do not be afraid of them." And this account is found in Numbers chapter 14 from verse 6 to 9. Despite Joshua and Caleb's passionate attempt to convince the Israelites of their good report, the Israelites refused to be persuaded. Their hearts were hardened because of unbelief, and they considered stoning Joshua and Caleb. Due to their unbelief, the generation of Israelites who were delivered from Egyptian slavery, excluding Joshua and Caleb, died in the wilderness and did not enter the promised land. 40 years later, when Joshua succeeded Moses to become the new leader of the Israelites, he sent 2 spies into the promised land. These spies met with a prostitute named Rahab. What Rahab shared with the spies confirmed Joshua and Caleb's report to the Israelites 40 years earlier. Rahab said, "I know that the Lord has given you this land, and that a great fear of you has fallen on us, so that all who live in this country are melting in fear because of you. We have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to Sihon and Og, the 2 kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan, whom you completely destroyed. When we heard of it, our hearts melted in fear, and everyone's courage failed because of you. For the Lord your God is God in heaven above and on earth below." If the Israelites believed God and acted on His word that came through Joshua and Caleb, they could have entered the promised land 40 years earlier than they actually did. Don't allow your unbelief to rob you from experiencing the will and purpose of God for your life. God consistently proved His faithfulness to the Israelites for 40 years in the wilderness. Despite this, they still chose to not trust Him. They chose to focus on what God didn't do for them, and as a result, this mindset became the breeding ground of unbelief. Let's learn from the mistakes of the Israelites and reflect on what God has done for us and others. I believe that if you should reflect on God's faithfulness to you and other believers over the years, and journal what comes to mind, you will undoubtedly end up with a body of irrefutable evidence that will confirm God's unmatched reliability and trustworthiness. It is my conviction that your meditation on this body of evidence will produce freedom from unbelief and freedom to trust God with all your heart. If you are struggling with unbelief in a specific area of your life, it means that in that particular area, you are trapped in the orphan mindset. In some cases, people really desire to believe God in those areas, but they feel like they simply cannot believe. This unbelief is possibly due to a stronghold of disappointment that may have been established in that area over the years. A father who brought his epileptic son to Jesus felt exactly this way. He undoubtedly prayed for his son's healing for a long time, and even brought him to the disciples of Jesus for prayer, but to no avail. And this account is found in Mark chapter 9, from verse 17 to 18. He experienced disappointment after disappointment in this area of his life. When this father eventually came to Jesus, he told him about his son's situation, and Jesus replied, "All things are possible to him who believes." Immediately the father of the child cried out and said, "Lord, I believe. Help my unbelief." And this is found in Mark chapter 9, from verse 23 to verse 24. Belief in God is not the result of enforcing your will to believe God, but surrendering your will to His will. It's resting in the everlasting arms of your Heavenly Father. Why should you trust God in uncertain times? Your trust in God in the midst of uncertainty is based on the certainty of who God is and what God has already done. The Lord wants to take you on a journey of becoming fully convinced of His goodness, faithfulness, and reliability. If you wholeheartedly believe in Him, you will live in His rest and perpetually experience His peace and His joy. And this is the antidote to unbelief.